Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
It's spinning! It's spinning! Jonathan Sexton has made it!
Do you feel moderately happy?
No, I feel like I've been kissing my sister, I suppose.
In the pocket for his drop goal attempt. Here he goes, O'Gara. He's done it! That surely is the Grand Slam.
We target players all the time. That's part of rugby, isn't it? Let me know.
Sexton, wonderful pass and Stockdale finishes.
There'll be more than grenades. There'll be full tanks and full shells landing on the Aviva.
Grand Slam winners on St Patrick's Day at Twickenham.
Now then, welcome along. We're reflecting on round 2 of the Six Nations wins for Ireland, for England and for Wales. England sitting very pretty top of the table. 2 bonus point wins from 2. Brian O'Driscoll is here in studio, as is Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent. Gents, you're both very welcome.
Thank you.
Back to winning ways was the theme of the Irish weekend.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't without its flaw, but the important thing was the victory. You heard from the comments afterwards from Joe Schmidt that there was a lot of nervousness. You could see it in the early exchanges. Scotland really came at us for that first 15 minutes. A lot of physicality, a lot of intensity that they brought to the game, exactly as you would anticipate in Murrayfield. They were never going to lie down. But I thought we took our opportunities very well when they presented themselves. A bit fortuitous with the Murray, but the Stockdale try was brilliantly conjured.
Is that an old move, a new move? Had you seen that?
I've not seen it before. I've seen players, looking disinterested and then being the strike runner, but not that actual one. So yeah, it's always nice seeing new ones. But it's the small bits in that that is the difference.
Anything in particular?
Yeah, it's the deepening of the ruck to make sure the negative defender on the far side of the ruck can come around and plug. So Tyg Furlong just kind of swivels his back in to make sure that they have to go further to get around, because that's really the guy who's going to make the tackle. But actually, the very last second, you can see Sean O'Brien in the ruck, who clears out, and Bergen, I think it is about to get up off the ground and might kind of brushes Stockdale as he runs by, but Sean O'Brien gives him a little jersey tug just before it happens, and it's 3/400ths of a second, 3/10 of a second, 4/10 of a second. He mightn't get a full shot on him, but he might get something on him to be able to slow him down for the cover to come across. So we talk about those minute details, and I think that's what had been missing from Ireland's performance as well. Their detail hadn't nearly been as good the previous week, but those small things are the difference between him galloping away and scoring a really important 7-pointer and the pressure valve being released, and having to then go through multiple more phases to try and create another opportunity. So I thought they were very clinical in what they did, and it was a great victory in that they had to really just dog it out. They weren't at their best, but sometimes you get great satisfaction out of those ones where you're not brilliant, but you're still good enough to get it done against an incredibly spirited team.
Yeah, it's not the first or last ugly win in Murrayfield.
No,
on a windy day.
No, and
one of the great stats from the first half was that Ireland spent 15 seconds in the Scottish 22.
Mad, isn't it?
That's 6 seconds each, those 2 run-ins.
I thought it was more important that they spent pretty much the first 5 minutes in their own 22 and came away unscathed pretty much,
Shades of England about that again, weren't there?
It was a shaky start, and I suppose that's the context of the whole thing. Coming in off I think that's what makes this a good result, is the week that they'd had, the bashing they took the previous week, both inside and outside the camp. Joe would have torn that first performance apart and then tried to build them back up, but I thought for them to start as shaky as they did and play their way into it with a little bit of luck on that first try was very impressive. And I have to say, I don't know, Murray feels a bit happy-clappy as a ground, and the whole day left me a little bit cold as a game. And I watched it back today. It was actually a much better performance than I probably gave it credit for at the time. And I thought that they started to show a bit of the shape that we expect from them, a bit of they're still not quite where we would expect them to be based on November and last year. But there was much better signs of the structure that we know they can go to. And putting Sean O'Brien back was good. I thought Jack Conan played really, really well. Their bench contributed much more than they had done last week. Ulton Delan, like unbelievable 10-minute cameo. Dave Kilcoyne again. So there was definite signs. I think if it would have been a very, very good result if they could have got that 4th try, and if Rob Carney had maybe seen Stockdale on his left rather than go for that offload to Farrell that time, or even when they got in 5 minutes from time, had the two opportunities in the Scottish kind of 22 around that area, and one was knocked on by Bundyaki, and the other one went astray as well. If they just managed to get a fourth, it would have been a really good day at the office. But I think England are winning the Six Nations anyway, so I think that chasing bonus points is probably not what this is about anymore.
It could be over before. It could be what we did last year, over after 4 rounds.
Yeah.
Just to pick up on your point, it's funny that I watched that offload back inside to Farrell again, and beautiful little play to make it happen. Carberry's missed pass, Farrell ran a great line and stuck Seymour, and as a result just flashed it across the front of him to Carney. In fairness to Kinghorn, he defended it really well. He didn't make a decision, he just backed off and waited for his cover to come across, exactly as a fullback should do. You can retrospectively look back and go, Carney should have just thrown it to Stockdale early, and then worst case scenario picked up a trail and gotten an offload himself. Could have gotten a cheap try. He hasn't scored one for 18 months or so, and he's mad after one. But I thought it wasn't the worst option. It just wasn't a great execution. And if that does go to hand, it's actually they'd only 2 tries at that stage. But with 25-30 minutes still to go in the game, they were going to get a fourth. But they're creating chances, and Rob looked good in
very sharp
in counter attack, and that's just that's the next component, is just trying to stick those offloads. You score tries when that happens, when you're making line breaks, and then you get offloads.
There were suggestions that Kearney was somewhat Henshaw was somewhat isolated against England at full back. So was Rob Kearney better supported by the players around him at the weekend, or is it just the Rob Kearney effect?
Bit of both.
Okay.
Bit of both. I watched him for a while. I watched the game twice since seeing it on Saturday, and I just watched him for big parts, and just watching him cover the in-goal area, particularly with how big the Scottish in-goal area is. When we were down on our line, watching him patrol the backfield, his positional sense there, knowing that he's going to get very little help from his wingers in that position, knowing when to go hard and push and stay in front of the ball. He is. It's an element of telepathy at this stage. He doesn't need communication from his players in front of him, from his wingers. He just knows where he needs to be.
Did he have that from an early age?
I think he probably did, but again, it's a learned skill over the course of 10 or 12 years. He's even longer. He's 32 years of age. He started at 18. This is probably his 13th or 14th season.
Extraordinary. But he did get better support than poor old Henshaw got, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
The game wasn't as good either, was it? Like, Scotland weren't asking the questions that England were asking. I thought just Kearney looked really fit. He looked like, for a guy who's had such little rugby since November, and even struggled through November, and who struggled so badly against Scarlets, he looked like a different player. He just looked so sharp, and whatever they've done over the last 10-15 days since he came back after missing Portugal, it's worked, because he just looked right on point.
Shane Horgan made a point where he referenced you, and I'm sure you won't mind, where he was talking about how one of the first things to go, as you're reaching the end, is
this could be one of a number of things. So
no. It was just interesting. It came on the back of the Carney discussion after the missed tackle against Scarlets, and Shane Horgan said that he mentioned you and Darcy as 2 players who never really missed a tackle, and then maybe just towards the end that happened, a touch, and it was a slight loss of agility, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, you can describe it better. And so that was almost the warning sign that was flashing when Carney missed those tackles against Scarlets.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. There was 1 or 2 I got done in a game against Scarlets. I just got flat-footed and then burnt on the outside by a player that you probably ordinarily would not expect to do that. If it's a Jonathan Davis, you might go, okay, fair enough. I'm not happy, but at least it's a top-class international player. This player in particular wasn't that. It was a nice, solid Pro 12 or Pro 14 player, but I remember being just a bit embarrassed. This happened at before half-time, and I remember Joe coming over to me and saying, you need to kind of cop onto yourself about how down you are about it, because it really affected you. I was like, God, that shouldn't be happening, and I think you're so frustrated with yourself that you sense, is this the end now? Is this how it's going to slowly unravel? And I would never have done that in the past. Why is that happening now? So it is something that does your ability to compute the message from your brain to your legs or to whatever muscles need moving. It just takes that little bit slower, and it becomes so frustrating.
Your last season that happened in, or did you? eke out another one or two?
I think third last. No, I think second last year.
Okay.
Yeah, second last year. So Joe would, it was 2013.
But there was no sign of that from Carney on Saturday at Murrayfield.
No, he didn't have a lot of one-on-ones to make. He had that questionable challenge.
Just smashed him, didn't he?
Yeah. Whether there was, I saw the British channel that was also hosting the game. There were some questionable remarks from their Scottish pundits there as to whether the legality of it. I think they had probably a point in that too.
So Rob Kearney has reasserted his status. Not that he ever really needed to, I think. It was always just rustiness that we were talking about. That said, where are we if come a World Cup quarter or semi-final, for whatever reason, Carney is unavailable? That is still a question mark, isn't it?
We're going to see Henshaw again, I think, at 15. I don't know, will it be Rome or will it be one of the World Cup quarter or the World Cup warm-up games, but I think we'll see him there. He clearly doesn't think Larmour is full-back for this World Cup cycle. If he did, he would have started last week because he was fit and available. Larmour's, that 23 jersey's his, I think, to keep. So I think he will try Henshaw there again. It might even be the last two games of a 6-day turnaround. He'll look like he said now he's in World Cup mode, that this tournament, he's won 3 of them already. It's okay not to win this one. He's in a kind of a dress rehearsal mode. I think we're going to see a bit of juggling for France and Wales. So we might see Henshaw there again before the end of this. But yeah, I think if Henshaw come in and shot the lights out against England at 15, he would have had the jersey, and that would have been really hard for Rob to get it back off him. But now it's definitely Rob's, and even if Henshaw comes in and does well against France, I think Rob has earned the right to play against, to go into that World Cup as the number one.
What about Addison?
I think Addison's problem is he's playing 13 for Ulster.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I wonder, is he just not quite doing it at training the way he seems to be doing it in games? And that's usually a telltale when it's not computed from what we've been watching in Europe and in the Pro 14, where he's been really, really good at 13.
Played a lot of rugby, hasn't he?
He has played a lot of rugby, but he's been, he's so quick as well. He's one of the quickest in the squad. His versatility of centre wing full back, like he's a perfect 31st man for a squad, but yet he hasn't. His name's not really even getting bandied around as
Adam Byrne was in
option.
Adam Byrne was in Murrayfield as the 24th man in the backs, which you kind of think if Addison was next man in, that's the way Joe usually brings them over, and unless he just feels that after all those European games and the role he's been playing with Ulster, he needs a break. I don't know. Maybe we might see him in Italy, but yeah, you're right. He seems to have slipped down a little bit.
And we'll get on to Carberry in a bit more depth in a few moments. But is he in the mix to come in at 15? Potentially down the line, or is that no?
I think in one of the non-Japanese or Scottish games, if he had to, Joey's not going to let you down. But I think, to Rory's point, a World Cup quarter-final or the big games, it's stability he wants back there, and that's why I agree with him that Larmour's not his guy at the moment. He's perfect because of his flexibility and versatility of playing multiple positions. But ultimately, he needs a Carney or a Henshaw, someone that has a good kicking game, very good aerially, can cover the background, and has lots of experience. Larmour has that crazy X factor. But I don't know if that's ultimately what you're going to get tested with when you play against a South Africa or a New Zealand and they see a guy of 5'10" back there with limited experience.
I think if he'd better depth at 10, he'd look at it. But right now, his third choice 10 has never played international rugby before. Ross Byrne has 2 caps, maybe 3. So he's looking at Carberry going, I need this guy to be a 10. And he slipped in there for the last 10-15 minutes against England. I think there's potential for him to go into a kind of a Bowden Barrett style finishing role off the bench if Johnny's able to get through 80. But yeah, from the start, his role is backup 10, and they're trying to get him as many minutes in there as they can.
So Brian, do you share Rory's sense that we'll see Henshaw again in the 15 jersey this tournament, and it's we're doubling down on getting him ready to step in if needs be come World Cup time? Yeah,
it's interesting just looking at Joe's comments. We've done very well over the last 5 years, so he's taking the pressure off the expectation of now winning the championship.
So I'll give that quote. If people didn't see it, and then you can make that point, because he said if we'd never won one of these before, if we'd never won a Six Nations before, we'd be even more gutted. But we've done well in the Six Nations in the last 5 years. So if it doesn't come to pass this year, there is a big thing at the end of the year for us. And anytime we get the opportunity to blend guys in and be forced to make late changes and be forced to kind of reconstruct what we do in the pitch, I think it helps vaccinate us against what happened last time at the 2015 World Cup, just if people didn't see those quotes that you're referencing. So there is a sense of
He's licensed to trial. I think that's what he's giving. That's what he's almost spelling out, that there's a strong likelihood that that's what he's going to do. I think that there would have been unfortunate pressure not to do that if we'd won 2 from 2, because then it would have been about winning the Six Nations, winning a Grand Slam, whereas that's gone now. So I felt that you would see a lot of the 30-man squad, and now definitely that the pressure is off, and that England are front runners in this competition, that now you cut your cloth a small bit and absolutely do what benefits you for later on in the year, because it'd be lovely to have something to play for in the final weekend, but there's every possibility that it might be beyond our reach after 4 games. So get your combinations in, play the players that you feel are going to be part of your World Cup squad, and give them game time, and see, it's not even see whether they're up to it. I think he knows what that squad is. It's just give them experience at pressurised level at Six Nations rugby.
Because we wondered if Joey Carberry would see game time, or what games he would see, and then events conspired. And it's twice now this season, after the Castor game away from Munster, when he had not a great game, he rebounded brilliantly, and then he had to regather himself a whole lot more quickly on Saturday. I would think his head was spinning and his stomach was churning, and he felt horrific for those 60 seconds after that intercept pass.
Yeah, I think it wasn't even that. Only his first pass was quite nervy. He's a very good passer of the ball. The very first one he threw was a little bit low. I think Farrell caught it. It was fine.
Okay.
But it looked as though it was a little bit tentative. A guy that was nervous, and it's understandably still a young man, and it's a big situation to find himself thrown in. Also, you're replacing the World Player of the Year. There's added pressure that comes with that. Yes, he's been very good for Munster, but now there's constant question marks. Is he the one to challenge Johnny in advance of the World Cup? And this is, for him, is his opportunity. So of course there's going to be excitement and nerves and everything that comes with that. So the first one was a bit edgy, and brilliantly read the intercept pass, but the way he bounced back from that, and I think it was a multitude of different parts to his game. It was obviously, besides the line break in the pass to Earls was fantastic, and he has this ability like no other 10 to get himself out of trouble or use his feet to just create something where he's running down a dark alley and all of a sudden it's turning what could be a miserable situation into a brilliant attacking opportunity, and very few 10s have the scope of doing that because of his acceleration, because of his footwork. I don't even think, I was talking to Johnny Wilkinson about this yesterday, I don't even know if Bowden Barrett he doesn't have that footwork. He's got that crazy acceleration, but he doesn't have that back 3 footwork where, Shane Williams, you're backed into a corner and through multiple steps you're able to get yourself out of trouble in a phone box, whereas he has that, and I think there's a looseness to his game, but that brings such a great excitement. He's quite a different player to Johnny. Johnny's a bit more strategic and a bit more formulaic, and particularly the older he gets, and he's just lost a yard of pace as well. Whereas Joey comes in and he's almost the antithesis of that. He just comes in and he's sparked to life, and maybe doesn't run the pattern system as well as Johnny does right now, but he brings something totally different and something equally as exciting.
And is that okay? I'll bring you in, sorry, Rory, but that's a really interesting point. Is that in any way destabilising for the team, which is so structured to go through a certain quotient of a match or a tournament with Johnny, and then you have this very different player in Carberry, brilliant in his own way, obviously, but who doesn't, as you said, run the same patterns?
No, I'm not saying he doesn't run the same patterns. It just doesn't. I don't think he sticks to his guns quite the same way as Johnny does, and maybe there's an element of patience to that Johnny will wait 2 or 3 phases to really build for the next time. Joey, I think he backs his ability to be able to fix a problem on his own where there's nothing really on, and he goes himself. Whereas there's no doubt Johnny. I think Johnny, we're talking about, what you lose and your footwork of that. I think Johnny has definitely lost half a yard of pace. And I don't think he's as comfortable in the open spaces as he once was. So when he makes a break or a half break, I think he's looking to get rid of it pretty quickly. rather than backing himself to to carry for 10 or 15 yards and throw those big passes. Whereas Joey is at the beginning of his career, he's quick, he's agile, and that is his game.
And that's fine.
And he's an elusive runner, and that's
and the team can roll with that.
And you do too. It's an adaptable team to be able to fit into the environment of whoever's there, because they're both such good players. It's not like, you're dealing with a Carlos Spencer where it's a complete maverick.
Yeah.
Joey is still able to fit into the confines of what the expectation of the team is and the 10 is, but he just adds something, a little extra spice to things, where Johnny probably controls things just that little bit better.
Interesting. What did you make of it all?
He's banked some trust, hasn't he? Like Joe trusts players who've delivered from him in games. We've seen it with Marmion, who keeps getting picked, but based on that Australia performance when he came on the wing and did so well, and he, that England game where he started, he's come into that game. I think he had 15 minutes on the sideline waiting for Johnny to actually come off, because Johnny first got treatment after the Murray try. He got treatment twice more after that, and eventually came off. So like Joey knew he was coming on early. Just it was a matter of when, really. You could kind of tell he was on a bike, so he had a long time to think about it. So that probably feeds in. If you're just up, you're on. You don't have any time. He probably had to process a lot of thoughts before he went on. That probably fed into that bit of nerves. I think if you give him that ball to Cian Healy rather than try to give it to Rory Best, Cian Healy's through with Best on his shoulder. Maybe not the best man to make a line break, but still. And Best said, that was probably our fault for the way we called it. That maybe he's just trying to, give a young guy a bit of help. But it was slow ball that maybe he should either gone out the back or given a flat. But the way he played himself through that adversity was really impressive, and I think that's going to stand to him big time. So he's now started a test in Australia. He's played an hour pretty much of Six Nations rugby, which we'd never done before. And there's a lot of talk that he's going to start in Italy as well, which is another milestone, albeit against a team that Ireland would fully expect to beat and beat well. So it was impressive, and he created an awful lot for Ireland. I mean, that Rob Kearney break was a lovely flat pass from Joey. The break he made it, that was from a sloppy, pretty tired Sean O'Brien pass. He just picked up and made something out of nothing. So it was just really impressive to watch, and it's something that, whether it's Quinn Roux calling the lineouts, Jack Conan jumping in for serious stander, it's all stuff that builds towards that 31 and being able to trust players when the main men are out.
He plays a lot of heads up as well, and just, I was kind of noting down some of his big moments in the second half, where even small little clever things, where he threw a ball to Peter O'Mahony and went to fill out as 10s aren't meant to go to rucks in general. You're not really meant to be clearing anything out. But then quickly realised that he was isolated, and then went and won the ruck on his own. Won the shoulder before one of the back rowers came in, and no one else was at that ruck. It was literally him on his own. Conor Murray got it away. That's turnover ball if he doesn't go to that. So small little clever nuances to his game that maybe people wouldn't have an appreciation for, but it's there's no next phase if he doesn't go and win that.
Okay. Aside from the power plays, which we touched on, there was a general criticism over Ireland in the 22. Not the most sophisticated of game plans up there. I
think it was partly the plan just to wear Scotland down and keep the ball during that second half. I think they got ahead. Again, I don't know if the bonus point was a massive focus. I think it was, if we get it, we get it. Maybe that last 5 minutes, that was pretty poor. A lot of changes at that stage. Yeah. It is something that they can improve, but I think, again, given the nature of the week that they'd had and the amount of changes they had, I don't think we're ever going to see a particularly fluid performance from the team. I mean, there was pretty much every line in the team was affected by injury or change. So, it's something that we've criticised in the past, but I'd probably give them a pass this week based on the fact that there was so much change and so much lack of cohesion.
Are you giving them a free pass?
Yeah, it wasn't a flawless performance.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the same success as they have had in the last 12 years. But it's a bit like, the public are never happy. It's where we're at.
Was it basic what they were doing in the 22?
Was it basic?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was, and probably we need to think our way a little bit more, be a bit, have a little bit more deception, or we've not just power plays, but we've got little phase plays that are able to manipulate the defence to do something that we, that they don't want to, and then react as such. And maybe we could have thought it out a little bit more.
And do we in other games tend to be better in the 22, or is that kind of our lot?
We score more points in the 22 than anyone else in the Six Nations.
That's true.
A lot of it's a pick and jam too.
Yeah.
You know, if you get in close, you know, we've had a lot of success from that. You think about the amount of tries that Bundyacki's run in from close quarters. You could see Chris Farrell showing an awful lot as an extra runner out wider to try and go at them. And we're not a team that tends to be able to bludgeon many sides to death, but yet we're very effective at that area because we target our ruck very quickly, create really quick ruck ball, and they have difficulty in getting numbers around the corner.
And is that okay with the view to the World Cup? That'll get it done against most sides, the best sides?
No, but I think that'll be an aspect of their game that they'll hope to improve on as well. I don't think that they'll be overly pleased with it, but at the same time, I don't think we have to be scathing in our comments that it was appalling. They just didn't quite have it. They also got met by some pretty ferocious defence as well. And Scotland, you have to be given credit for the manner in which they did defend for large parts of the game. You know, they were. I don't know if Roman Putt had his world's greatest game. I think there was a fair bit of stuff missed on both sides. He could have refereed the offside lines a little bit more for both teams as well. As a result, you could have had a bit more of an attacking flair to the game. But you got to roll with the punches, and I think Ireland did well. Okay,
we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Get your comments in. The best ones are in the running to be named our Heineken Star comment. And you can win a pair of tickets to Leinster against the Kings at the RDS on Friday the 22nd. There is a comment in about the referee, which we've just dealt with. Brian Core says it was a nervous, timid win. Somebody wants to know, Dave, asking you, Brian, can you ask Brian, you've obviously played a fair bit with Carney. Is he generally, throughout his career, known to be unlikely to offload or pass? Does very well going into contact, to be fair. I can't remember the last time he made a break and then passed the ball to a support runner, says Dave.
I don't think it's probably been a real strength in his game. I think he's improved vastly, particularly through the Leinster system over the last couple of years. I've seen him offloading an awful lot more and passing, clear 2-on-1s and so on. But if you were to pick out the real strength of his game, is it one? Probably not.
Okay.
But I'd love, again, we always try and pick holes in everything.
Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's
perfect. Conor Murray. Talk to us about Conor Murray, because Schmidt talked about the kicking game a few times and certainly said it has to be better. He said of Conor, and he did say, look, Murray started taking a bit more responsibility when Sexton was feeling a bit sluggish, and he said at times was trying to kick from positions he wouldn't normally kick from, and when you're trying to do something too hard, it sometimes goes awry, and just said generally kicking game needs to be better.
Yeah, I don't think he's where we expect him to be, but I thought he was better this week.
Okay.
I thought his passing was quicker. I don't know if Ireland set a little bit closer to him, I'm not sure, but there was he certainly connected with it with more passes, or they were out in front of players instead of being up around, which was a problem I thought for the ball carriers against England, which helped England get the dominance that they did. His kicking was very long, but I don't know, was that a strategy? I don't know, was that something that they planned? Because it was very consistent, so you'd have to imagine that that's what he was going for. And Schmidt did say that it was about cohesion, and that sounds like he just needs that. I think that's why he's staying on for 77 minutes, partly because Carberry's there and the game was in the balance, but also because I think Schmidt feels he needs rugby in his legs. And it's a bit harsh on John Cooney, who's been playing very well and looked good off the bench against England. But I think they just need to invest this time. They feel they need to invest this time in Conor Murray's form now, so that either by the last two games of the season, or even that he finishes the season strong and then goes into the summer and autumn strong. So I think there was signs of progress. He's still not at the pitch that we all know he can get to. But I wouldn't be surprised. But by the time we get to Cardiff, he'll be playing much better.
Yeah,
I don't know if their kick chase was quite as good as I would have anticipated. That phrase of kicks is only as good as its chase is there for a reason. And I agree. It's strange to see Conor Murray kicking as long as he has over the last couple of weeks. It feels. There's a kick that Johnny Sexton uses a lot from the 22, which is, it's a halfway house. It's neither a Garryowen nor a long kick, but it's a kind of 30 or 40 metre kick to the touchline to be able to give a kick contest. And we expect we get so many results from Conor Murray's box kicking that it seems strange that we would change to a different tack of kicking long, but then not having a brilliant line chase to be able to follow that up and smother the opposition. Once or twice they might have caught Blair Kinghorn in the backfield, but it wasn't as though they were catching grass, kicking over the wingers or fullbacks' heads. I think conversely, you look at the likes of England's kick chase at the minute is absolutely phenomenal, being led by Owen Farrell, and it seems like there's a heightened anticipation for when the ball's being kicked that they get excited about. I don't know if this Irish team is living that right at the minute.
Their energy seems low for some reason. I mean, even the things we expect from Joe Schmidt teams, the animation around the ball carrier isn't really there, and I think that's one of the reasons that Scotland, this dominant tackle stat that's come out in the last couple of weeks, but Scotland managed way more of them, and a few times they just knew who was getting the ball because everyone around was just kind of had their arms down by their side. And then the kick chase is probably an attitude thing as well. And you wonder, like, if he has decided that this is a World Cup preparation window, are they doing more in training? Is this a different approach than what we're used to over the tournament? It'll come out in the wash, but just don't seem as high energy as they did in November. And I wonder, that all feeds into those kind of elements of the game that you would just expect from Joe Schmidt teams, because their kick chase has never been a weakness in the state.
They are, just as we kind of wrap up Ireland talk. I mean, the win at the weekend is coolant on just the atmosphere and calms everything down a little bit, and we don't have to get too excited or dismayed. But everything's just a little bit off.
Yeah, but not a mile off. It is a bit off. It is. It's not to the standards that we've seen over the course of the last year. And I think when you hit those heights, that any sort of drop off, it's always going to be a few question marks, like, have we peaked a little bit early? Are we running on empty? And there's no reason to run on empty. We're the national team that's looked after the best in probably World Rugby, along with the Kiwis. So there's no reason to be. But yeah, I think they will be a little bit disappointed by their performances, including the standards of Scotland. Some of the errors they made on Saturday, very unlike them, and something that we haven't seen for some time. So they won't be happy themselves. But yeah, I'm trying not to get too downbeat about it all. It feels like there's an air of negativity that wants to descend on this team, and that it needs just fighting off. And
well, I'm not trying to be. I'm just
good.
Firing the questions. But it's just there.
We're not where we were.
There's a nagging worry, teams and individuals, invariably because of just cycles which seem to govern all sports, have peaks and troughs. And last year was such a peak, so phenomenal, that when you come out the gate and have two performances like Ireland have had, not saying that the weekend just gone was terrible, but suddenly there is a nagging doubt or a nagging question, which is, well, can you repeat what they did last year? And other teams also have had a long time to look at that footage of last year and really prepare and plan, and how do we pick this apart?
Everyone raises their game as well when they're playing against the highest seeded Northern Hemisphere team. So we're number 2 in the world, and rightly so, on the back of the last year's performances. However, that when you are at the top, you're there to be knocked, and or close to the top, and that's why teams know that they have to raise their game. Otherwise, they'll be put to the sword by Ireland, as was the case last year. So, it's you get the sense. I think there's no reason to panic, because Joe's never failed before. In his provincial teams with Leinster. Even when they got knocked out of Europe, they went and won the Challenge Cup. Irish teams, even when they lost to Scotland and Wales, I think they finished 3rd in the Six Nations that year. Wasn't the end of the world because of other performances. So it just feels as though, because Joe looks as though he's sorted the issues of the last World Cup out with the strength and depth, that it will be okay.
England make everyone feel a bit nervous, don't they? Like, I think England being so good at the moment, having had their year and a half off, basically, I think unnerves everyone, because I think everyone has this fear that if England get their act together, they've got so many good players, and I think when you see them doing all the things that Ireland usually do so well, and some things better, and you see Farrell at the top of his game when Johnny Sexton struggling, I think that is another factor. I think when people are looking at Ireland and going, God, we were the team of 2018, but are England the team of 2019 when you want to be the team? But I think, long term, when all the bodies are fit and firing and have the matches under the belt that need to have matches, and you don't have 3 or 4 second rows missing, and Conor Murray's played his way into form, Rob Carney, Johnny Sexton have the miles under their belt that they need, that they didn't get before this tournament, it's a different team. Like, Ringrose was missed on Saturday. You put Ringrose in that team, you suddenly are more creative. You know, you've got another string to your bow that you didn't have on the weekend. I think there is very much mitigating factors, and I think as long as they didn't go and lose to Scotland and play as poorly as they did against England, and you know, that would be time where you'd actually become quite negative about them, because there was a bit of a spiral there. But they've steadied the ship, and to win in Murrayfield is a good achievement.
Yeah, okay, totally accept all that. One very last quick one before we get your thoughts on England. Joe Schmidt made the point that because Sexton plays so flat to the line, he is likely to take punishment. We saw it maybe in a microcosm with the Stockdale try. In the interest of self-preservation, is there any other way Johnny Sexton can be as effective as he is and avoid that?
Yeah, I think he's got to find a halfway house. If he wants to get whatever about getting to the World Cup, I think he can manage that no matter what the way he's playing. But he's still going to get bashed. But if he fancies playing for 2 more years, playing like that, it's a very unusual thing for a number 10 of his age to continue playing as aggressively as he does, and it's a testament to his bravery to take those shots, to really go to the last second to create the holes for his other players. Whereas he probably could have given that pass. He'd fixed, was it Alan Dell that threw the big shot for the Stockdale, right? He'd fixed him pretty early, but yet he wanted to make 100% sure that he was committed to him. I think he's got to throw that half a second earlier and take the chance that Stockdale will have enough to be able to get through, and then brace himself for the collision. He's literally thrown the pass and leaving himself wide open. And Scotland obviously had spoken beforehand that every time he throws a pass to smash him afterwards. And to be honest with you, you couldn't argue with any of them. They were committed, in inverted commas, but yet they knew what they were doing. They could have pulled out of those tackles, but why would you when you get an opportunity to throw a shot on one of Ireland's best players? So I think from a self-preservation perspective, he doesn't have to get back into the pocket, because that's what the older 10s do. They get deeper and deeper and deeper and then ship it on, and then the centres have to do the hard yards, and it makes it more and more difficult because defences push off. Whereas his willingness to step up to the line, I think he just has to be a little bit selfish and look after himself by giving it a fraction earlier than maybe he ordinarily would have, because he is 33 and because we need him, you know, more importantly than ever in the World Cup.
And your point there seemed to suggest that when he throws the pass that late, there's no time for him to brace himself at all. He's totally open and vulnerable. So
because it's literally it's the 11th hour that he's throwing the pass, and at that stage, the job is done. The job was done at the 9th hour probably.
Yeah, okay.
But he still brought it to that very last second, just to be really sure that it's the best case scenario. I think he's got to look for the second best case scenario, which there's a good chance that players will go through on his passes and on those power plays, and that he's able to brace himself for the collisions, because sometimes you're your own worst enemy, and you know, it's one thing being heroic, but you know there's another thing being heroic on the sidelines.
There's one in the second half where Joey Carberry does quite a similar pass, draws the man and gives it, and I'm not sure if he's slightly earlier, or is it just because he's Joey and not Johnny Sexton, but the prop kind of mauls him instead of actually following through. I think he gives him a little bit enough time. I think if the flanker or the prop has time to think, he's going, no, that's a yellow card. Whereas if he's already committed, he's going to do it. So I don't know, is Joey going slightly earlier, or is it just that Johnny Sexton is Johnny Sexton and you got to smash him?
My take on that is that Johnny plays squarer than anyone else in World Rugby at the line. That Joey, you know, gives himself an out, because when he throws his pass, he tends not to be forward, his shoulders facing the goal line that he's attacking. It's just slightly angled to the touchline, and so he can fade off out of it, and so any shot that might be coming, there's a momentum will go against or go with that collision, whereas Johnny takes it aggressively to the line and throws it and leaves himself square wide open, and they're two very differing things. So if Johnny, you know, but that's what works for him. You know, as a centre playing outside him, that was the dream. Because you knew he was fixing the men inside, and as a result, you know, Gordon Darcy, who was beside me, was fixed by the next guy, and then the next guy, that was my job. So, and it's a simple knock-on effect. Whereas Joey's passing, he's not a lateral passer, but he's not as aggressive as Johnny is to the line.
Where did Sexton pick up this? I mean, it's brilliant, really. It's just
very few 10s running as aggressive.
Was there someone at Leinster who drove this into him, or did he just?
No, I think that's just him. I think that's just his football. I can't think of that many others that do it as aggressively as he does.
Right.
Farrell. probably.
Well, let's talk Farrell. 44 points to 8. 1911 was the last time they beat France by more, and that was only by a point more. So this was pretty much record-breaking. They are, like, it just feels like a long way away from George 4 to 10 and Farrell 12 and no Tuilagi and no Vunipola and question marks over who was going to be full back, and Slade hadn't really blossomed the way they hoped, and there were questions over the back row. Underhill can come back in. Everybody's raving about Tom Curry. Like, there's a whole bunch of jigsaw pieces which have just fitted in very nicely.
They pretty much got the Lions tight 5, and maybe we all underestimated the Lions hangover they'd have. Plus Farrell played a lot. You know, they backboned that Lions tour quite a lot, and maybe last year they had a bit of a hangover, and now they've had a summer and come back in, and they just look fresh. Tuilagi's like a new signing for them. Like, I mean, his career almost had a 3 or 4 year break. You know, I mean, he's just a completely different weapon than what they've had before. And it's just everything's clicking for them, and you know, it helps that France didn't have anyone in the backfield at all for the entire game, and you know that I'm looking forward to seeing how they get on against Wales, because Wales will have done their analysis and watched the first 2 games, and I know the kicks are really clever, but you'd hope that they'll be able to cover them to a degree. But England with momentum, we saw it in 2016 and 17. They're a strong, they're a very difficult force to stop, and I mean, France were awful, but England made them look awful as well.
How good?
Yeah, very good. Their power game is right up there now with New Zealand and probably no one else. When you've got the Vunipolas, you've got Tuilagi, and I think Tuilagi's working off about 75% of what he's capable of. Like, we're not seeing the 2013 edition yet, and that'll come. You know, when he gets a bit more confidence, a bit more game time, he gets a bit more international match fitness.
When, like, around September, November time.
But he is a, you know, he's a special player, and I hope he's not scarred from his 4 or 5 years off, because that would have to beat up any player. But he looks as though he's back into it. He looks as though he has that fire back in the belly and that nasty spark that everyone's a little bit afraid of, that where he could punch the head off. He had training if you looked at him sideways. So it's always that, having that in your team, that steely psycho, is always a lovely place to be when you're going to battle with them. So I think Vunipola, I think Tom Curry has been exceptional the first two games. What a player he is at 20, you know, 7 caps in. And
because I mean, before the Ireland game, there was an element of and they have a 20-year-old in the back row. Turns out he's rather
Underhill
good.
seemed like the big loss.
Yeah.
You know,
but the fact that he's an out-and-out 7 as well is suiting them so well, where he was a groundhog, but also he has that, he's got a nasty physicality to him as well.
As well as these players all coming back, and you know, Slade as well, and Daly, and all these, you know, the pieces of the jigsaw. Are there things that John Mitchell and Scott Wisemantel have changed? Are you seeing differences in how they're going about their business as well? And I appreciate you need the players, it's a circular thing, you need the players to do certain things, but are they doing things differently than they were last year?
I was talking about it in the lead up to the game. It becomes such a simplified game when you become collision winners.
Yeah.
And you know, and the defence is on the back foot, and you're on the front foot, and you're able to set up, and it's a matter of jogging forward rather than trying to get the timing of your run by being back on your heels. And there are tiny little moments in the game that have such a huge impact on what happens further out in the field. And the little rugby league plays that they're doing, that Saracens have done so well for a number of years. Now England are starting to capitalise and do that really well. And I think the worrying thing is they'll get better the more that they're in camp, the more they're together. They don't get to spend that much time in national camp, probably I think even less than our own national team. So to be able to hit the ground running the way they did with the first performance, and then back it up in with not quite equally as a good performance, but very, very good. And bizarrely, Eddie Jones said after the game that he thought the second half performance was better than the first, which was just absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, their depth is still not as good as it seems. Like when you bring Dan Cole off the bench, you wonder about their depth at tight end. They should have moved on from him a couple of years ago, I think. And Mako went down on Sunday. Toje's already out. I think they're still, like every team, they're still reliant on a couple of key figures, and Farrell being the most obvious one. I thought France would test them without a Toje, and they didn't really, but I think Wales will. And if you take Mako Vunipola and Toje out of that team, that type 5, it's a very different proposition. They're all good players, but they're not quite the world-class players that they have. They've got serious momentum going over there, but I think if they lose those two, I think Wales can get at them, but I just don't think Wales are strong enough to do it.
Oh, do you know? Okay. Well, we'll preview that game in good time. Wales on an 11 straight winning streak back to 1910. It's record equaling. They made 10 changes to the starting 15 in Rome, so it wasn't kind of the clearest reflection of what they're going to do come round 3. Brunel is 3 wins from 13. It's really grim. It's almost all-time territory kind of low, isn't it? They're ranked 10th in the world now. I was reading over the weekend they're closer to Spain in 21st than they are to New Zealand in 1st. There's no real signs of this thing abating. There's no signs of them just picking something close to a best team with any kind of regularity.
They look absolutely rudderless. They look leadership-less. They look rudderless. Completely one-dimensional. They've picked a big pack, but when that doesn't work, when teams are able to chop tackle, they seem to run out of ideas. And yeah, I question the appetite and the want to really fight for the jersey. I just don't see it in them. And you know, Huget was a bit flaky a few times before he went off with this HIA. Parrot, was pretty disappointing. In fairness to Dupont, he did well when he came on in a pack that was going backwards. But even picking Bastareaud, the knee-jerk reaction of we've lost our first game. Bastareaud's a thing of the past. Before the competition, and immediately lose the first game and to Max bang off the team onto the bench, bring Bastareaud back on, and he did next to nothing in the game except absolutely get monstered by Courtney Laws. So I don't know where they go. Being brutally honest, I don't think looking at their coaching ticket that it's the right way to go about it. There's serious headbutting going on between the top 14 and the FFR, and their fitness looks poor and they're unconditioned and just lacking in major ideas. So it's back to the drawing board for them.
Well, on their fitness, even of those, so 3 wins in 13, they have led at halftime in 7 of those games, but then lost 5 of those 7. So they blow open the second half as well, as we saw last week. So last week was part of a trend. If people haven't been following things, it's not just a one-off. We got to wrap things up because the clock is coming against us. Sean O'Brien's move confirmed.
Yep.
So 3-year deal, London Irish, 32 years of age. One of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, said O'Brien. I've played all my rugby in Ireland. He said, I felt the time had come to explore other opportunities, challenge myself, new environment, new city, new club against different players and teams on a weekly basis. So we wish him well, and you and Keith Wood talked about this on Friday, and it makes sense from O'Brien's point of view. The question is, when Andy Farrell comes in post 2019 World Cup, does Sean O'Brien continue to play for Ireland?
I presume not. I think it's to the World Cup, and then he'll be available just as Donnacha Ryan and Simon Zebo are. But I think just because it's London Irish, there's no formal link there anymore.
I guess will he be more of a Johnny Sexton exception?
Not
or?
at 32.
Not at
I don't
32.
think so. I think if Dan Levy, Josh van der Fleer are all, if there's an injury crisis, he can go back to him. But Jordy Murphy again. Yeah, like there are. Joe Smith was asked about this, and it probably didn't get reported because there was loads going on pre-England. But he was asked about Zebo, and he said basically we want to invest in our provinces, in the people who go to see. The people who go to see our provinces to see our players, and he was very forthright about it. And I think as long as Nucifora is in charge, I think that the policy is very much along.
That was my next question. I was going to say, is that more Schmidt's discretion or Nucifora's?
I think they work in tandem.
They're on the same page.
Yeah, they're hand in glove.
And we suspect Farrell is with Schmidt and Nucifora on this, do we?
And I mean, Sean O'Brien's been less available than he has been available since the Lions tour. So I think that they probably feel that for the next cycle they'll need to move on. You got Scott Penny's coming through at Leinster. There's a production line coming through. Look, I think I would like to see Zebo and Ryan considered, but I understand why they're not. I'd love to see Sean O'Brien play for Ireland if he's playing really well in the Premiership. To me, I say why not. But I'm not trying to negotiate with players who are looking to leave. So I get it. I like to see the best Irish players play for Ireland, but I think the RFU will say no.
Brian, if Sean O'Brien's playing his best stuff at London Irish next year, lighten it up. Yeah,
it's a tough one. Depends on what Andy Farrell has kind of been told or what his policy is, whether he continues with that Smith-Nucifora regime or not. The reality is, though, that we've got very few scenarios where, similar to the Johnny Sexton case, where he was far and away the best option. Whereas Sean O'Brien, even the peak of his powers, Sean O'Brien of 2 years ago, yes, he's definitely better than the other two sevens, or including Jordy Murphy as well, but they're not a million miles behind them. Yeah. Whereas Sexton to the next player, it was quite the gulf with respect to those other players. Such was Johnny's qualities. So I think we're unlikely to find ourselves in that predicament again. And so I think players know that if they do go overseas, it's highly likely that they're not going to be selected nationally.
Okay, we've gone somewhat over time, so that is round 2 of the Six Nations done. As England look likely to win a Grand Slam to finish?
Yeah, it does. It certainly, everything points to that. Wales, it'll totally fall on that game. They win that, they don't have to get a bonus point, of course. If they win that, it'll be 14 points still with Italy and Scotland to play at home. So no, it's all over Red Rover then.
I think even if they lose to Wales, they picked up 10 points and Wales didn't get a bonus point in Rome. So, they've already amassed enough points. They have a comfortable enough lead. I think I wouldn't quite give it to them yet, but I think they're pretty close already.
Okay, great stuff. Thanks for being with us, Brian O'Driscoll and Roy O'Connor from the Irish Independent.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.